Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
What's your haunted house story that made you believe in ghost or paranormal?
I lived in an old house on a bunch of property for 5 years in Alabama with my boyfriend. It was a renovated old-as-hell house with a big wrap-around porch. We were on about 150 acres of land, with only the property owner's vacation house sitting on a lake about a half-mile away. The vacation house was constantly empty except for a couple weekends a year. We were completely surrounded by woods and a couple neighbors across the street, but still far away. Our driveway was a quarter-mile long. This place definitely made me believe in something. One night, before I had actually moved in, my friend and I went to the house to hang out with my boyfriend, but we arrived about 15 minutes before he did. We sat on his porch waiting because the doors were locked. I called him and he said he would be there in about 5 minutes. I could hear the sound of the wind in his truck from the windows being down, and I knew where he was beforehand, so I know he was telling the truth. We sat and talked, and suddenly some strange old-sounding music starts coming from the garage or maybe the woods. We couldn't tell if it was from the woods or the house. We instantly got uneasy and just looked at each other, puzzled. Then we heard heavy footsteps on the porch, and they got faster and faster, like somebody was running around the porch towards us. Neither of us said anything and just ran off the porch, straight into the dark open field behind the house. We stopped and just started asking each other, what was that, etc. I called my boyfriend to see if he was actually there, pranking us or something. But he sounded genuinely surprised and pulled into the drive about 60 seconds after I called him. He checked the house and the property for somebody and was genuinely freaked out as well. This happened over 15 years ago. The friend and I reconnected after 10 years, and both of us still remember the same exact thing. In the same house, I woke up one night after I had moved in and I couldn't move. I heard voices and pots and pans in the kitchen and could smell food. It was as if somebody was just cooking dinner with friends in the kitchen. This one felt very real, but I understand it could be sleep paralysis, etc. But I've never had that happen before or since. That same boyfriend was killed in a freak accident down the street from the house. I was in a hotel room by myself before his funeral because we had moved out a year prior. I was very upset getting ready to leave for his funeral. I was sort of talking to him while I was putting on my makeup. Then I looked over and I swear he was sitting on the bed just looking at me. Then I blinked and he was gone. Then on my drive to his funeral about 30 minutes later, I was using my voice dictation on my phone to respond to a text from a friend asking what happened to him. I pressed the dictation button and said his name to start explaining Jason died in an accident, but this sounds silly. After I said his name and before I got any other words out, the text dictated his name followed by 10 or so emojis that he used to send me sometimes that were pretty unique to his love talk to me. Like an octopus, a banana, other things that were typical emojis, and I had never had my phone put emojis when I used the voice dictation unless I specifically said smiley face with sunglasses, etc. The final one that made me truly accept that maybe there is something more happened 3 months ago after my nephew was stillborn. My brother and his wife lost their baby son to an unexplained stillbirth a week before he was due. It was horrible. They couldn't even bear to go home after they left the hospital, so they went to my mom's house. For some reason, I was able to gather the most strength to carry on and take care of life things like feeding everybody and making sure they had clean laundry, etc. Because the family was in so much pain, it's like everybody entered a simultaneous extreme depression. So I went to stay at my mom's house when they went there as well to be there for them and to also help my mom take care of my dad who had advanced dementia. My brother and his wife had just left their room for the first time in 3 days after they arrived at my mom's, so I went in there to make their bed and I tidied and picked up dishes, etc. When I turned around to exit the room, there was a little white cotton ball-sized light just floating there, not moving. It was the brightest light I have ever seen, but it didn't light up the room or anything. I just stood there and it floated away and down the hall before it disappeared. It is by far the craziest thing I have ever seen in my life. It was not ball lightning, I have seen that. I didn't bob up and down like you would think of a floating object. It was very steady and extremely still. Almost like a glitch in the Matrix.
I'm living in one now. He's a good guy. Old man by the name of Peter. He died a lonely, sad death. The landlord I rent from told me his story. He had a wife, she died from suicide. Had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. The boy went off to Iraq, died in the war. His daughter died from a drug overdose. He haunts this house. Harmless, but he's mischievous at times. He loves my dog OD. He and OD play around from time to time. I'm watching TV, OD in the chair with me. Oldie's ball will roll by, OD will jump out of the chair and chase it. I live alone, by the way. Sometimes I'll catch OD standing in front of the closet, ball in mouth, wagging his tail. The closet is where they found his body. He had a heart attack. Peter and I have an understanding, and I respect it. As long as I don't bring green dishes in the house, they don't get broke. LOL. Don't ask me why, but he doesn't like green dishes, cups, pots or pans, etc. I got a green dinnerware set for Xmas once. Had them nicely placed in the cupboard, came home one day they were all on the kitchen floor broken. Shrug. I had purchased a small green crock pot. OD and I are asleep one night, and I hear a crash. We run into the kitchen, crock pot on the floor. OD runs back to the closet, stands there, with his ball, wagging his tail. No more green dishes, no more breaking incidents since. When I was about 26, my daughter was about 3. We lived by ourselves in a duplex/row home, whatever you call them. It was a nice-sized 3-bedroom house. I'm hearing impaired and wear hearing aids. So I had one of those video cameras you put in your child's room. So you can hear and see them. Being she's my only child, she would play in her room a lot of times while I would either be cleaning or watching TV downstairs. She had this really cute little table and with 4 chairs, Disney princess set. She was big into playing with her dolls and teacup set. She would always talk and carry full conversations with them. Not thinking anything of it, she would do this daily. Figured she just had an overactive imagination. She was really smart for her age and talked with a very advanced vocabulary. She would always talk about a little girl named Ashley when she was playing by herself. Once again, not thinking anything about it. Well, downstairs I had a fireplace that wasn't used anymore. And most fireplaces have some type of mantel where you can put things. Basically a shelf, if you want to call it. Mind you, my draft was about 3. She barely knew how to spell her own name. I was cleaning around the fireplace and I shit you not. There on the bottom of the fireplace in red crayon is the name Ashley. So I'm thinking at this point something is not setting right. I have my child talking to her imagery friend named Ashley. I just now discovered the name Ashley under the fireplace. So then I proceeded to ask her questions about her friend. A 3-year-old should not be going into great detail about her friend. She then tells me in detail what this Ashley person looks like. Telling me she's about 6 or 7 years old, long black hair and is missing her face. Okay, now shit is getting really weird. I ask her to draw mommy a picture. She draws me a picture of this little girl and a fire. Which explains her face. I'm starting to kind of freak out a little. Then things start happening in our house. Things start coming up missing and put in random places. I start feeling cold spots near the upstairs and in the basement. So then we're both watching TV downstairs. You know, as a parent, the ones who are parents in this thread, when you cuddle with your little one and they fall asleep on you? I'm half asleep and I shit you not, I am paralyzed, I can't move. I see this image of the little girl my daughter has been telling me about for months. Red dress, long black hair, and her face are literally burnt. I'm frozen in fear and I have my daughter dead asleep on my chest. I finally have enough courage and control to tell this little girl, you don't belong here, goes into the light and go home to God. I swear after saying those words my daughter never brought her up again. It was by far one of the most realistic things I've ever encountered. I have a few more, but that's for another time. My daughter is 16 now and she still remembers her friend. Also, I must note I brought it up to the landlord a few weeks after it happened. He literally froze when I asked if there was a fire. He said yes, in the basement a little girl named Ashley was trapped and wasn't able to escape due to the door being stuck. When I lived in the California wilderness, I had these swings that my siblings and I would play on during the day. At night, we slept with our windows open because our AC never worked. Sometimes you could hear the swings moving and little girls giggling. Scared me shitless even as a teenager. I also had a spirit that would stare at me from my closet. Every night, I would say goodnight to it, dumb teen I know. One night, I was startled awake by somebody yelling my name, but my sister, who I shared a room with, didn't wake up. I tried to go back to sleep before I felt an earthquake start. We were still shaken up from the 2019 Ridgecrest earthquake, so I had my shoes right by my bed. The earthquake passed pretty quickly, but I felt like the closet spirit had my back that night. When my family and I moved into our current house, November 1, 2019, we had just driven from Cali to Texas in one go. Everybody was miserable. We had no idea that this property would be haunted, but it felt like as soon as we got out of the cars. I have friends who will not come here after dark. I live near a seasonal haunted house that stirred up some angry spirits for funsies. Whenever Halloween comes around is when everything reaches its peak. It never feels like a spirit stays here longer than a week. Almost like a paranormal highway. Even my non-believer brother has had run-ins with spirits here. There is only one spirit that stays. People who have worked at the haunted house never go back because of how evil this thing is. This spirit feeds off of fear and misery. So, our first 2 years here, it was terrifying. I had my first nightmare in years here. In my dream, a big black dog was in my doorway, its back was almost to the top of the doorway, and its skin was melting off its face and back. I was sobbing in my dream, and I was shaken for weeks afterward. Another dream I had was that I was thrown onto the ceiling by my neck, and I could only look down while screaming and flailing. After I had these nightmares, I cleansed my room, and it made a huge difference. My room now stays colder than the rest of the house, and Imp has the best vibes, but I could just be biased. Recently, I went ghost hunting with my siblings and a friend. We couldn't do the house because my parents were sleeping, so we explored the property and the shed that I built. Nothing happened during the hunt. When we went back inside to review the footage, we heard what sounded like laughter. We were in my shed trying to contact spirits, and we were asking questions. The only noises in that shed were us, no crickets, no drafts, nothing. The property has been really quiet recently, but we'll see when Halloween comes around. My mom's house, my childhood home, is haunted. When I was little I saw a little girl in the reflection of my sister's TV. Was so scared I didn't sleep in my room for about a whole year. When I got older I would come home from school and the house would be empty, but I would still hear my name be called out. I always responded, but after just hearing my name initially never got anything back. When I was a teenager I would hear knocking. It was quiet/faint, but I would knock back and this would continue through the night. I was a night owl, still am. I once had friends over for a party and so many people stayed over, we had many people sleep in our basement, fully finished, had a futon and couches, and they complained that one of my friends that slept with me kept running up and down our stairs all night, but said friend was lodged in the corner of my bed, making it impossible for her to get out without waking anybody up. Funnily enough, another night my friend and I were up playing video games and heard the running. It went up and down our hallway, then all the way down the stairs to the basement, then all the way back up. I thought it was my little sister, but sure enough she was sleeping in my mom's bed. So that running continued for hours, and no, we did not check the basement. Cut, we're not stupid, we've seen scary movies. After I moved out I thought I was done with paranormal activity, but nope. And super funny again, my mom did hospice for an old lady who lived in my house before me, so I know somebody actually did die in my new house. I named her Jerry, short for Gertrude, and she taught my 13-year-old Dixie to roll over. I'm not kidding, this dog's head would move in a circular motion and then a second or two later would roll over, something he never ever did prior. She also told me that my kitten was adorable one night when I was having a party and I thought my sister said something to me, but the voice didn't match, so I was like, "Wheat?" Everybody thought I was crazy or drank too much life, but I know what I heard. So yeah, I got a few paranormal things happen to me. I was about 7 to 8 watching RoboCop alone in the late 80s, I know, but it was the 80s. We rode our bikes across cities and were home before nightfall back then. My mother ran a quick errand and other family who lived there were just out. We stayed in a city flat. Well, I heard a noise from the bedroom behind the living room I was in. So I pause the movie and walk into the room, and there's a woman standing there. She's not looking at me at first, but then she looks directly at me. Not a slow turn, but not fast either, just a turn. I froze for a second, but my brain quickly erased that test answer and chose C, run. I looked away and backed away back into the living room, and ran for another door that leads to a hallway adjacent to that bedroom. The house was pitching black except for the light from the living room and the bedroom. I had to go past another door that leads to that bedroom. I ran past that door like, name your favorite track star or shortstop. I basically slide down the steps to the first floor, unlock the door. It's been about 35 years, but I'm sure it felt like years getting that old school lock open, and I ran to a neighbor's house. I left the front door wide open and everything. Bonus quickies, fast forward to about last month. I woke up at like 3 a.m. and just need a drink, old man swag, right? My wife and 3 kids were asleep as expected, house quiet. I go down to the kitchen, open the fridge to get some grapes or a little snack, close the fridge, and out of my peripheral vision is something. I turned and I could clearly see a shadow person, but as soon as I say them, they vanished. I don't have sleep paralysis, no other issues. I freaked for a minute. I joke with my wife about, how do people stay in a house that's haunted, or they see something creepy, or, now I know. I was tired, y'all, and had work in the morning. I prayed that we be covered by him and went back to bed. We're also on vacation now, just gone to Alcatraz yesterday. We took a bunch of pictures. I didn't notice anything creepy, but the morgue was off-putting. I'll be sure to post a bug for ghost pic if we find one. This is clearly a giant, gnat-shaped ghost in Al Capone's cell, guys. In a lot of cases people try to explain things away as the brain playing tricks on you, the primitive mind not understanding what is really happening. But in my personal case this actually strengthens my belief of what I did experience. I worked security for 15 years. I think I worked on something like 50 locations. And just one had unexplained paranormal stuff happening on a weekly basis, almost daily. Why only there? If it is indeed your mind playing tricks on me, why did nothing ever happen on the other 49 locations? For the people wanting to know what happened, just the basic stuff. Hearing footsteps behind you, seeing shadow figures in the corner of your eye, lights flickering. The weirdest was this glass door on the security room, leading directly outside, inside a secured area, that sounded like somebody banging on the window with clearly no one there. This is why I believe there is something, maybe ghost, maybe something else. If I needed to explain it, I would say there was a door in the same location in another plane of existence, multiverse theory. When I was 16, I played the Ouija with my friends at their house. I was only doing it to show them how ridiculous it was to actually believe that you were communicating with the dead. Man, was I wrong when I asked it questions only I knew the answer to, and it was answering everything word for word. I couldn't believe it. I was freaked out and stopped playing, but I didn't realize you have to close the portal before ending the game. After that I started waking up to footsteps above the ceiling in my room. Every night I'd wake up at the exact same time, 3:15 a.m., always at that exact time. I dealt with it for a few months until one night it just got worse. I had woken up again at 3:15 in the morning, but not to any noises this time. It was someone or something putting their hands on my shoulders. I froze for like 10 seconds and then I ran out of my room into the living room, and you can hear the footsteps from the ceiling making their way to the exact spot I was at in the living room. Nobody in my family believed me. They thought I was on drugs until I confessed to my mom about playing the Ouija board, and she was really disappointed in me for messing with that kind of stuff, but I never played with it ever again after those few times with my friends. That was in 2006, and to this day it still haunts me. Every now and then I can feel something watching me when I'm alone, no matter where I live. This is a warning to anybody reading this that's curious about dabbling in the occult. Please don't do it. You will absolutely regret it. The house I shared with my friend in college had something going on with it. Anytime I was home alone, I would hear a man and a woman talking to each other. Thing is, I could never understand the words they were saying. But I could very easily tell they were observing me and talking about me to one another. It was always the same two voices, and they were always talking from the room I wasn't in. I'd get up and go look for them only to hear them laughing from whichever room I got up from to investigate. I'd hear them while I was in the bathroom. I'd hear them while I was in my bedroom. They were a couple of assholes for sure, but they never manifested into anything other than voices. And like I said earlier, they'd only get to talking when my friend wasn't home. Honestly, I thought I was losing my mind. One night as he and I were about to graduate and move on, I was like, "Man, do you ever hear like, voices in the house?" And I shit you not, he looks at me with an expression that can only be described as relief mixed with terror and says, "A man and a woman talking about you from the other room." It was nuts. We were both just so relieved that we weren't going insane. I was like, "Dude, do we have ghosts?" And he was all, "Man, I hope so." And so we chalked it up to ghosts. We still talk about it sometimes. Still not sure if it was ghosts or what. I should hit him up. So when I was about 10 years old, I lived at my grandparents' house. They were the first owners. Previously the land was just a cornfield, and no deaths/murders on the property. In the basement where we kids mostly hung out, there was a laundry room off the main room with a bunch of old junk, among which was an old exercise bike. When you hit the bottom of the steps, the bike is right there to your left in the laundry room. See it every day. Now this bike had broken like a decade before I was born, and the brake was clamped down permanently. My younger siblings and I would play on it, trying to force the wheel to turn by putting all our weight on a pedal, then hopping on and seeing how long we could pedal before it jammed again. Usually, it was like 3 or 4 rotations max. And it would take 2 of us, one on each pedal. Anyways, one day walking down the stairs and I hear the unmistakable dragging sound of that brake against the wheel. It's moving decently fast. As I register what I'm hearing, I'm already at the bottom of the steps and I see the bike pedals turning like someone was riding it. Almost immediately the momentum subsides, and within a rotation and a half, it stopped dead. After staring at it in disbelief, and trying to see through the fabric of space-time to see if I can see ghosts, I go up to investigate it. Brake still broken. Still have to stand with both feet on it and push to turn. Don't know what it was. None of the adults believed me since, no one's ever died here, we can't be haunted, but it stuck with me. If places can be haunted, my house growing up is certainly a contender. My parents lived there for 10 to 15 years before I came along, and they had stories, too. Before I was born, they had a radio in the room attached to the kitchen. They were doing repair work on the house with a friend, and suddenly an old ball game started playing. They turned it off a few times and it just kept playing. A few things like that. I don't remember this, but when I was little, I had imaginary friends I had no right to have. I played with an old man with the name of my great-grandfather, and described him with no pictures. Mom was concerned there was a predator or something until I pointed to air. I also played with my stillbirth older twin brothers, crying because one was being mean to the others. Mom said that was the hardest one to deal with. I've always had horrible nightmares. Blumhouse would be so lucky. I was not allowed exposure to any violence or anything, but I had vivid dreams of pain and violence. I felt uneasy in my room occasionally, but it would pass. Many a night I ran with my eyes closed, or was simply too terrified to move so it wouldn't hear me. My dad used to bring stuffed animals back from work trips, think Beanie Babies. He brought me a green Beanie Baby bear with some weight to it. I slept with it that night, of course. As a restless sleeper, it wasn't unusual to wake up to things yeeted across the room. What was unusual was waking up to see the bear midair next to my bed. Then drop. Then come up again. Then drop. Then come up again. Then drop. With each thwack of it hitting the ground, or a hand, my heart sank. I had no idea what to do. The next time I saw the bear, I snatched him and burrowed under my covers. I regret not looking down to this day, but I still don't think I would. Things would go missing or be moved. Things would appear that I'd never seen before. When I got older, I would feel pressure on my bed. Large pressure, as in heavy and or long. I saw a boy in my room multiple times. He was a teenager with long hair. He always looked tired, and he was mischievous, but I always liked the vibe he gave off. He liked one particular corner. He did like sitting on my bed and lying with me. One night I woke up face to face with him. One night, I woke up to him sitting and messing with my covers. Not now, dude. I have a test tomorrow. Wait, gone. He disappeared one day after I found out we were moving. I didn't want to move at all and was heartbroken. That night, he looked angry as heck and heartbroken, too. Never saw him again after that. When I was working as an RA in a dorm, I was alone on our floor for a week. All the doors were propped open at all times, which was spooky at night. Several nights that week, I heard doors close or footsteps. One morning I came out to all the doors shut. Nobody fessed up. Saw shoes under my door a few times, both from the hallway and from my room. Every time I passed a particular room, I felt so uneasy and panicked. There were so many weird things that happened there. When I was with my then girlfriend, now ex, we had a condo that was haunted. Everyone who came over had experiences that lasted a couple years. After that, in my last house I've a couple small things happen, from growling in my bedroom closet to whispers. My current home I've a few, banging on the walls, things falling for no reason. A few months ago I put a knife in the sink and an hour later we hear a loud ding. I go to check and see the knife in the drain sticking straight up. The thing is, I put it in the left side of the sink and there weren't any other plates or utensils in the sink, it was empty. I have a recording from Nestcam showing that no one was in the kitchen at that time and you can clearly hear it drop. I tried to recreate it, thinking maybe the knife slipped in the drain because the sink was wet, but the knife was too long to drop in the drain. The only way you can do it is by sticking it straight up. Last week I was at this house I've been remodeling for a client. Nobody has lived in the house for 5 years, and I felt someone right behind me and heard them talk. I turned around and nobody was there. Some of my employees have heard and felt the same. They told me weeks ago and I brushed it off. Some of them have seen a shadow move around upstairs and won't go upstairs alone anymore. I have a lot more stories. I've always been a skeptic and still try to be rational, but some things you cannot explain. I think it's the wind, my mind playing tricks on me, etc. I've always believed in ghosts because of experiences I had as a child. When I turned 17 it just all of a sudden went extreme, then eventually died down. I then lived in a haunted house. It wasn't haunted until a trailer park got torn down that was right behind my house. My house is the first house you would see if you walked to the end of that park. The first sign of the haunting that happened was when I went to the back bedroom of my place, which wasn't in use by anyone. I all of a sudden froze and an extreme feeling of dread came over me, the hairs on the back of my neck rising up. It felt like someone with a knife was about to plunge it into my back and end my life. It felt that dreadful. I couldn't move for 10 seconds, totally paralyzed, my instincts telling me to run but I couldn't. When I broke free of the paralysis I ran out of there and never went back there again. After that so many things happened. I even had a friend stay there since he needed a temporary place to stay while I stayed at my parents'. I had to take a mental break from there, wondering if it was just all in my head. I didn't say anything about the place being haunted to him. He only stayed for one night. When I went to get the key from him he said, "Man, what's wrong with your house?" I had to pray to Mary just to fall asleep. When I went into my house I saw that he left a hammer and a jigsaw on the couch to use as weapons for protection. Don't ask me about how to use a jigsaw as a weapon. There were also some of my clothes stuffed into the floor AC vents. He must have thought something was trying to enter the house through the vents. Yeah, I think those spirits were pissed because of their homes being torn down, which is why it felt so negative there. During the day it wasn't so bad, but at night it was an entirely different beast. The air just felt thick with dread. I even let all the stray cats sleep with me on the bed so I wouldn't feel so alone, and since they are such magical creatures I felt that it would help, which it did. I think those spirits took an interest in me because every house I stay at or frequently visit, such as my best friends, became haunted when they weren't haunted before. I am positive that at least one followed me, from Florida all the way to South Carolina. Problem was, it was a non-human entity. That's a long story also. 99% of my EVPs I get are just from the houses I would be currently staying at. I don't even have to go on a ghost hunt to gather evidence. I stopped doing all that though, gathering EVPs and such. I stopped everything that had to do with a haunting because of something very scary that happened that was dangerous. Long story. I lived in 2 separate haunted houses. The first I was 12. There were 3 bedrooms. 2 next to each other and the third were on the other side of the house, past the kitchen, and you made a left into the room. It was always dim in that room and just weird. My brothers were to share that room. And I had the one next to my parents. Well, they never slept there. There would be banging and a lot of noises coming out of that bedroom. My mom would be washing the dishes and something would come out of that room, walk past her swishing her long flowy house dress, and either the water would turn on in the bathroom or one of the bedroom lights would turn on. Our dinner table chairs used to move around. We would hear someone walking/stomping on the roof, patio chairs moved around and pool water overflowing. The 6 months we lasted there, I slept with my mom, and brothers slept with dad. The last straw before we left was that my dad had fallen asleep and he turned and his arm went off the side of the bed and he said someone grabbed his arm hard. We moved shortly after. Second house, we would see a figure sitting in the night on the sofa. My niece would hear crying coming out of the hallway closet. My mom sometimes would try to open the door to the laundry room and she said someone was on the other side pulling it to not let her open. The doorbell was always ringing between 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. Nobody would be there and my mom just never got up to check anymore. My dad would smoke his last cigarette at night in the backyard. One day, he came running from the back, through the side yard to the front. He said he felt something chasing him. Things would go missing for days or weeks, then magically reappear where they were originally left. My parents learned to live with that ghost because my dad had bought the house. The other was just a rental, so it wasn't a problem to just get up and go. My mom said the first house, though, she felt like it was something evil, but not the second house. Back when I was a kid and a skeptical, we moved into the nicest modern house on the street. Thought nothing of it at first, it was a welcoming home. Until one night while I and my little brother were playing Xbox, it sounded as if a big truck crashed into my room. Our faces turned white and we screamed in fear and confusion. My mother came in and disregarded everything we said and said to be quiet. Then I started hearing whispers and knocks coming from my window at night. But what really sealed the deal is when my mom's aunt used to babysit us during the summer. She would leave around 6 a.m. to go buy us breakfast tacos every morning. One morning after she left, I was awoken to what sounded like my mother's bedroom door opening and slamming. I can hear it coming from the end of the L-shaped hallway. Then that's when I heard footsteps stomping on tile coming down the hallway, getting louder and louder. It was just me and my little brother, who was asleep on the couch with me. I didn't know what to do. I had never thought I would be in this position and I wanted someone to confirm what I was hearing. So I screamed my brother's name as loud as I could. He woke up almost instantly and looked confused, but then the footsteps went running back towards my mom's room and slammed the door. Yet I still want to go check and nobody was there. Only my mother's aunt believed me, may she rest in peace. Back when I was a kid and a skeptical, we moved into the nicest modern house on the street. Thought nothing of it at first, it was a welcoming home. Until one night while I and my little brother were playing Xbox, it sounded as if a big truck crashed into my room. Our faces turned white and we screamed in fear and confusion. My mother came in and disregarded everything we said and said to be quiet. Then I started hearing whispers and knocks coming from my window at night. But what really sealed the deal is when my mom's aunt used to babysit us during the summer. She would leave around 6 a.m. to go buy us breakfast tacos every morning. One morning after she left, I was awoken to what sounded like my mother's bedroom door opening and slamming. I can hear it coming from the end of the L-shaped hallway. Then that's when I heard footsteps stomping on tile coming down the hallway, getting louder and louder. It was just me and my little brother, who was asleep on the couch with me. I didn't know what to do. I had never thought I would be in this position and I wanted someone to confirm what I was hearing. So I screamed my brother's name as loud as I could. He woke up almost instantly and looked confused, but then the footsteps went running back towards my mom's room and slammed the door. Yet I still want to go check and nobody was there. Only my mother's aunt believed me, may she rest in peace. When I was in high school, we used to do all kinds of shit that we really shouldn't have been doing. One night I was hanging out with some friends and they took us to an abandoned farmhouse out on the edge of town. These guys would regularly sneak onto this property to hang out in the abandoned house, so they were basically just giving me a tour of this place, and it was a super dark night. Of course, while this was going on, they were telling us all about how the place is haunted, how there was a murder-suicide there, typical high school kid. We went into the house very briefly, and then we turned around to go check out the outbuilding, which was like an old workshop/garage. One of my friends told me to close the door of the farmhouse behind me on my way out. I was the last person out, so I tried to pull the door closed and it stopped about halfway and couldn't be pulled any further. I tried again, then I tried opening the door all the way and then closing it again, just in case there was something wedged between the door and the jamb that was preventing the door from closing. After trying to get the door to close 4 times, I decided to leave it be and to let my friends know that the door wouldn't close. I turned around to catch up with them, and as soon as I wasn't facing the door, it slammed closed behind me. It didn't slowly creak closed, it didn't stop halfway as it had every time I had tried to close it, and it closed with force and scared the living shit out of me. We've been living in this house for about 5 years. It's 101 years old. About 3 years ago, we had a stretch of a few weeks where there was intense unexplainable poltergeist-like activity. It was active enough for me to take note of local tremors, none, replaced all the CO detectors, and had the fire department come out to check for leaks. Mrs. D00N3R, our dog, and I together and separately have all experienced things flying off shelves, scooting across floors and tables, etc. The most notable instance was the time I was in the kitchen and a fat-bottomed tin can of smoked paprika up and flipped over onto its side as if someone had smacked it. Another time was the 3 of us were in the living room when a stack of books on the bookshelf was shoved to the back by some unseen force. My dog still won't eat with his back turned to the bookshelf. And for the rule of 3, a cast iron 6-sided die my brother-in-law, he's fine, not dead, made when flying off the same bookshelf while me and the wife were getting ready to leave the house for the day. I like to keep an open mind. I have nothing to base this on at all, but I reckon it was something just passing through. Maybe it was bored. When we barely reacted, it was probably disappointed that its mischief failed to get a rise from us and moved on.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.